for today is meant to be a continuation of a series of information sessions leading up to our final meeting vote coming up in June. Following our land transfer celebration, we'll move into a simple information exercise on governance in June. We're going to follow up the activities with dinner, and I'm really glad that people are taking some time to be spending with us today. We'll open up our call upon our elder Eugene. If you could open us up with a prayer.
Thank you, Roy. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening to witness the event. Ask our Creator, our elders, to be always there for us in a guiding way, to give us the blessings that we need, and to be also a reminder that we do this in the best interest of ourselves and for the future of our whole community. So we'll ask our Creator to give us that blessing, open up our hearts and our minds, and have the ability to understand and participate in your own way. Thank you very much.
So this evening we want to open up our session having a little discussion on land transfers, land that has been a big part of negotiations in the treaty process since we began. Recently we managed to reach agreement among the negotiators at the table. A big part of the treaty-making negotiations concerns land. In our treaty work, we've managed to reach agreement on moving from 1,907 hectares of land to beyond 8,000 hectares of land that will become Sliammon Treaty settlement lands. So that's a big key component of the package that we're putting in front of the community and asking the community to endorse. In the work in securing the land, there's a discussion on points in time when land gets transferred from the Provincial Crown to the Sliammon First Nation. Sliammon was working with the idea of early access to lands is a benefit that is needed for Sliammon. And the reason that we're looking to have those lands transferred to Sliammon is for the sake of unlocking some of the wealth, some of the benefit, some of the value that's in those lands. So we were able to reach agreement on 4 parcels of land that there was agreement to transfer to Sliammon, and that transfer is going to be celebrated. It's going to take place tonight. There were 4 parcels that were negotiated. 3 of them we can signal transferring over to Sliammon tonight. There's going to be a 4th parcel that's going to come a little bit later, but it is coming. So it's coming down the pipe. The 3 parcels of land that are coming across to Sliammon will be, we call it the Warp Street parcel. It's a small but significant parcel of land. It's located by the ferry terminal in Westmead. There's parcels of land close to the airport within the municipal boundaries. There's maps that we have on the wall that people can come and have a look at to gain a sense of where those lands are. And the 3rd parcel of land is connected to the oyster plant operation that we have in Oakwood. So it's kind of a good place to be for Sliammon. We've reached agreement on the final agreement. This is one kind of small part of that overall agreement that we're bringing back into the nation. So I think the significance of having land move out from the domain of the province to become Sliammon lands, I think there's a huge reason to celebrate. We've gotten to where we've been working at to get to for a long, long time. And I think it's a good day to celebrate. So those are some opening comments that I have for now, and I want to pass the microphone across to you.
Thanks, I'll stand up. Thanks very much, Roy, and thanks, Eugene, for the opening prayer. Where did you do that? And thanks so much for welcoming me back here. If you look over on that table, I remember to bring my hat from when I was here for signing the Forest Consultation Revolutionary Agreement, just as I promised to. But I mention that because this whole process, and it is a process, as Roy's described, has been not only challenging, but it's also been really rewarding. And there's all sorts of little steps along the way that remind you of that. The hat reminds me of some of that. I know from today, and my travels here today, I'll take home more memories of milestones that we're reaching on the path that we're traveling together. This is a really significant one. And I want to thank you so much for welcoming me back onto your territory and allowing me to share some time engaging with people. We had a really good session today at the university, and we're going to be talking to some youth later. Roy's already described the land, that the different parcels that are coming over, and indeed the fourth one that will be coming over later. But stop for a minute and think about what this means, what it symbolizes. We have technical terminology that we use. It's a land transfer. There's all sorts of complicated documents that have to be signed, agreements, and how they're executed. But fundamentally, this is the beginning of the recognition of Canada, of British Columbia, of what has always been yours. That's a really momentous thing. It's a really big deal. And it's something that the people you see at this table, people sprinkled around the audience, and some folks who aren't here have worked very, very hard to get to. But this is a signpost on the way. When the journey seems really long, and the journey to final agreement in treaty has been really long, this is one more signpost that tells you you're getting closer. You're almost there. There's that little hill yet to climb. And you're doing it still together. And you're going to get there the same way you've gotten here to the early land transfers, which is the community, your leaders, working together with Canada, with the province. And we will achieve those goals together if we do that. So I won't go into a lot of the technicalities around the transfer. There's a lot of time to answer questions, and we want to do that for anyone who is seeking some answers to things that they don't quite understand about it. Roy's told you that the maps are up on the wall. That's another significant part of this. Because this involves the entire community, it's really important that people feel they have access to the folks who can answer their questions, and that they're getting real and complete answers, and they're getting very open and transparent information. And I want to commend Roy and Chief Williams and the others who've been working on this so diligently in your community, because what I've seen is they have really worked hard to create a process for all of you that is very open and transparent and gives you all the opportunity to engage in this yourselves. And that's so important, because that's the big difference we're working toward. These early land transfers represent a really significant opportunity. They're only a small fraction of the amount of land that will come to Sliammon in treaty, and it's 8,000 something, isn't it? Hectares of land that will eventually be brought to Sliammon in final agreement. But these lands are significant in the opportunities that they hold for you. And of course, the economic benefit from them, I think, has huge potential for planning. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of it. I want to thank the elders for helping to guide their community always through these processes. I want to thank the negotiators from all sides who work so diligently to get us here. And I want to thank the community for the kind of support that they've shown. This is always, these types of things are a very challenging path to go have to walk, and the chief and council and negotiators really can't get there on their own. They really need the support of the community, and the community's in there, and I think you're all to be commended. So, in closing, just to say, my heart swells with the knowledge of what we're achieving here today, and with the future opportunities that are there in front of all of us. And I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be a small part of it with you. I get up here and I talk and hold the microphone, but I recognize that I'm not the one who's getting all of this done, and that credit belongs to many of you in the audience. I want to acknowledge Sandy. Sandy wanted very much to be here at the final agreement signing, and she was not able to be here. But she was here for the public meeting last night, and she's here today, and I think hats off to you. You've certainly been a tremendous influence over what's taking place and a tremendous support, and you're being commended for that. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you. Thank you very much.
I think you passed the mic to me by mistake. So it's a good attempt.
Thank you very much for your warm remarks to the Sliammon people. Minister Polak, very glad to have you here, helping with this initiative to communicate our treaty to our membership. As our membership are the only people who are and will be the only ones that can vote on this, so it's much appreciated. And I think the levels of health service that are being offered are great, and I really want to see the Sliammon people take full advantage of this information that the federal and the provincial reps are willing to do for this. So a few things to talk about here. I just want to welcome our elders. I really wanted to do that. I haven't done that in a while, and it never really kind of occurred to me until this tough April went by for the community to realize how important it is to have us all here participating. Very tough times. Excuse me. Our world is constantly changing in front of our faces these days. These past 5 years have been quite a roller coaster ride here. Right now, I know people are scared. People are worried. Is this treaty going to sink us? Is this treaty going to make us bigger? Is it going to make us better? I think what we need to do is we need to have an honest look at what we have today and compare this to what is in the treaty agreement, and have an honest look at this and say, will this make my life better? Will this make my children's life better? Will this make my grandchildren's life better? And just have an honest look at this and just see what does the same old have. I know that our elders, parents, all want better things for their children and family members and the community as a whole. Nothing has changed here in the Sliammon community since the introduction of the Indian Act and to switching from the Desolation Tribal Sound Council to now the Sliammon First Nation. Not an awful lot has changed in this time. And some of these changes that are happening today we're getting an early incentive with these early land transfers, which is good. This is the only addition to the Sliammon lands that we've had. And these 3 parcels have great significant value. They present economic development opportunities. These lands are right smack dab in the heart of Fall River, and I know that people aren't really thinking too much of that right now, but this gesture helps to show that BC and Canada are willing to come and work with the Sliammon people. So just with that, I just wanted to acknowledge the uncertainty, the fear that's in the air with all this change that's coming. And the one thing that I look at being born and raised in this community is, I welcome it. I welcome this. people have to make the decision. And if that decision is yes, and yes, we'll move on, and I'm totally prepared to move on if it's a yes vote. But if our people do vote no, I just want them to know what they're saying no to. And this is where the federal and provincial people come in. And I know that they're prepared to do information sessions with family members, family focus groups. And that's why I just encourage everybody, please take advantage of these opportunities. That's the best advice that I can give. And myself personally, I want change. I want improvement. And I'm more than comfortable to sit down with anyone to voice that, to voice my opinion and welcome any questions. And it doesn't have to be in public. It can be behind closed doors. It can be at a restaurant, anywhere. But sending anonymous papers around is not going to resolve anything. It's only going to add to the divide in this community, which is there. And will this agreement fix everything and make everybody hold hands? Probably not. But you know what? It's like we need improvement. And the things that we're trying to improve are about social issues. And with more resourcing, I think we can start addressing some of these social issues. So just wanted to share that and welcome Minister. I also see we have former City Councilor Sandy Tremblay. Welcome, Sandy. I see we have Mayor Promosa here with his council. And I see reps from our Sliammon Chief Council here as well. I see Walter, I see Gloria. I think Bud was here earlier. Well, not Trista. But just wanted to just acknowledge this because lately there's been just such a buzz in the air, and that buzz to me is what I'm calling that is I'm calling that fear, and I think that this fear can also be used to try to answer some of the questions that are probably misunderstood with this whole process. So just with that, I'll close off here and just start the battle. So thank you all.
Thank you, Clint and Minister Polak. Today's a significant day to celebrate. Clint mentioned the Indian Act. Sliammon currently lives under that Indian Act. It's not been a good experience. It's not been a good vote for us. One of the directions or instructions we were launching out on our negotiation mission was make some differences, make some changes, make some positive differences for our community. Today we're celebrating one of those differences. We're moving out of that place where our land base is an Indian reserve. One of our instructions, go out and bring more land back to our community. Today, we're experiencing success. Some of that land is coming back to the community. We're taking that first set of steps of reestablishing our place in our territories. It's a small step, but every big journey starts with a first small step. And I'm really happy about the step that we're taking today. I think we're going to have a land transfer.
So, Chief Williams, community, this land is now returning back for
Okay, very, very glad and pleased to accept this early land transfer on behalf of the Sliammon First Nation. Thank you for your kind words, and I really appreciate that. As do the Sliammon membership, it's great to hear the minister acknowledge this transfer in the way that he did. I'm very honored and pleased to accept this on behalf of the Sliammon First Nation. Thank you very much.
will continue to live and flourish on their traditional land and properties.
Thank you again.
So, I think we should celebrate even more. So, first part of our evening was to complete the concert, and that's been done. The second part of the evening is to move into a community information workshop, and the idea of the second part of the evening is simply to walk through governance and governance messaging, the significance of governance, and to invite conversation about governance among our community members. So we have I'm going to hand over the facilitation role to our governance MC, Angela Wesley, please. Come on up. So for those that haven't met Angela, Angela is working as a communications advisor to the Sliammon Treaty team. Angela has done some work with the Howatt First Nation, and Sliammon has built some good communication relationships with Howatt and others. And we're wanting to use tonight to, I guess, gain the benefit from the experiences that Howatt have been through. So I'm going to pass this over to Angela.
Thank you very much, Roy. Good evening, good afternoon, what time of day is it now? Ukla, Shishikala, Kisakshi, Howatt, Nutanata. My name is Angela Wesley, for those of you who I haven't met yet. I'm from the Howatt First Nation on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and I come from the house of Upwinnesset in the beautiful Barclay Sound area of Brownsville. We had a good opportunity to host some of your members from Sliammon to our territories, or close to our territories, a while back. We live in paradise, but it's a little bit of a bumpy ride to get there. Minister, you're welcome to come out anytime. Check it out. It's well worth the trip. It is out in paradise. I want to start by congratulating Sliammon on your early land transfer. I think it's fabulous to see those kind of lands coming back, to hear your leadership saying that that's the first addition to your lands and return of your lands that you've seen in your history here. It's a great feeling to start to come back towards that independence. And I just want to point out that in Howatt and the Mano stations, our early land transfers were quite so early, so I'm a little jealous. We had to ratify and go through a couple of years of preparedness. We did get some early land transfers as well, but we are a little bit more remote and don't have as accessible land as you did. I'm very excited for your community and your hope. I haven't had a chance to address you. Those of you who do know me know when I get a mic in my hand, sometimes I carry on a bit too long, but I'll take the liberty for now. Once again, I just want to congratulate all of Sliammon. I come in occasionally, as Roy said, and share some information. That's something that we learned in the Monos Nations and in Howatt, is that we learned so much from those who came before us, from the Nisga'a, from the Sliammon. And it really, so many things were so much easier for us because we had the benefit of their experience. So when Roy and others asked if I would come in and share some of my experiences, I'm happy to do so. I understand what it feels like, the choice that's before you. I did a lot of work, as did my colleague John Jack, right in our community, facing those kind of fears that Clint talked about among our members. It's a huge decision. I was talking to one of the people from BC today, who said that they were out talking to some of your university students, and she said to me, I think today I got it. I think today I realized the kind of decisions that communities are being asked to make when we come to do this. This is life-changing. This is a campaign, not a numbers game. And you're taking it very seriously from what I hear. The questions that are being asked by your community are great questions. And you should keep asking them, because that's part of what we're doing, is we're changing our world. We have to be a part of doing that. So really congratulations to you in the decision that's coming up. It is a choice. your chief counsel said that she was yes or no at this time, and if you want to move forward, so I wish you well on that. So it looks like we have an opportunity for some further opening remarks to this part of our agenda. Chief Clint Williams will make some opening remarks, and followed by Mr. Polak once again. So, Clint.
All right. I'm glad that this session is happening tonight. I think a lot of the questions that are coming up from the community can be all resolved around the Constitution discussions. I see that the topic for this evening. People's comments are always, we're not ready. We're not ready for self-government. We're not ready for treaty. And what we're looking at is the day after the vote, if the vote is a yes, treaty isn't going to take effect that next following day. We're going to be building a government, basically a municipal government for just a simple example. So that government will be built and created based on the Constitution. The Constitution which was developed with community input throughout the whole thing, and also, I remind you, it was ratified by the community by way of referendum. So when people have been participating in these sessions, they didn't realize what they were participating in, and now you start looking back at it, all the inclusion, consultation with community members, and the development of the Constitution. That is the framework on which the Sliammon government will be built on. So the day after the vote, the treaty will not take effect. We're going to have at least 2 years from the estimates that I've heard to build this government, and then only after that 2 years will we have an effective date on full treaty. So I don't know if that assurance helps anybody, but I just wanted to share that because there's some confusing messages out there, and just wanted to share that with the opening comments that I see in the Constitution on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Williams. Minister?
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. I'll keep this short since I just finished talking a moment ago. Really looking forward to this time to dialogue. As I said, we had a chance to dialogue with some students at the university earlier. I think that was really valuable. You want to have everyone engaged and have an opportunity to ask their questions. You have a very significant choice in front of you. And I want to urge you to imagine the future as you would want it to be. I really think that while the fear is there, it's the kind of fear we all have of something unknown in front of us. And Manol has been mentioned, Tawasin has been mentioned. Sliammon is in a very good place because on previous occasions, for Tawasin, for example, to talk about what things would be like after treaty, you could sort of talk about Mishka, but it was under a different process. Tawasin had to deal with the theory. We think it's going to be like this. We're pretty sure it's going to be like that. You are in the very beneficial place of having nations that have gone ahead of you. And it means that questions can be answered not just with theory, not just with, well, we think it'll be like this. We now have some examples. We can look and say, well, we know it's going to be like that. We know it can unfold in this way. You can hear it from people who've had those experiences. So you're in a very good place to enable you to receive very good information about what life as a treaty First Nation can be like, because the examples are there for you. So I, like Chief Williams, I encourage all of you to take advantage of the information that's available, and I hope tonight will be able to add to that for you and give you even better understanding of how things are likely to unfold and to ensure that you have a very clear and open understanding of what the choices are in front of you. And thank you very much for allowing British Columbia to be part of that dialogue and allowing me to represent British Columbia here with you this afternoon, this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. The letter that went around to Sliammon, I wrote that letter. And the people of Sliammon want to be heard and need to be heard because there's a lot of things going on in Sliammon that the white people don't know. So I'm writing this letter on behalf of the numerous people in our Sliammon community who choose to voice their heartfelt opinions to me in regards to the possible treaty. The foreign troops govern our community. The community members have come to me to remain anonymous, and I will respect their wishes. I know this is no surprise to you all, as I am, who have heard many opinions yourselves in regards to the treaty vote and the treaty offers. Some of these opinions may be based on facts, and some may be based on hearsay. Whatever the case of our community, a Sliammon wants to be heard. I hope it's going to take the time to hear what we really all have to say for our wellness and our own hope for the future here in Sliammon. Another known fact is that our community in Sliammon is broken, divided, and as we have been subject to a lot of turbulent currents that have made us now project our hurt and paid ways that may be healthy or unhealthy. People look at each other every day, we judge each other, we hurt each other, and saying this amongst us, there are drug dealers, drug users, alcoholics, people who don't pay rent or leases, people who mismanage funds at work, people who use their knowledge about someone to hurt that someone else gains, etc. There are even people who are reading this letter right now and they're even judging me already. And now we have a treaty vote coming. But this really is our answer. Will treaty end our economic, financial, and emotional system problems that we face every day? We only ask because we are told that it will. Is this the only and final answer to our problem? Isn't there more options? If so, we can explore them. Why or why not? It seems that we are voting on only options. Does this seem fair, trick, or treaty? The following includes some very important history of our established rights. In 1763, the Royal Proclamation was formed and made legal by the King of England's signature. The Royal Proclamation gave to Aboriginal people a lot of solid rights in regards of their lands, etc. Is the Royal Proclamation still valid? Some argue that the Royal Proclamation is still valid in Canada, since no law has ever ruled it. The Royal Proclamation is enshrined in Section 35 of the Constitution Act. In this section of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees that nothing can determine or diminish the Aboriginal rights outlined in the Proclamation Act. The Royal Proclamation was also applied to the United States. However, American independence from Great Britain after the Revolutionary War rendered it to no longer applicable in the United States. However, it eventually created its own similar law in the Indian Acts. After reading this proclamation, you will see then as why it is so important that these laws that were initially made for us in 1763 should not and cannot be broken by any government body or any treaty. Also, I have, and we do hereby strictly forbid or pain or displeasure or loving subjects for making and purchasing or settlements, whatever, and taking possession of any of the lands above reserved without part, especially leave and license for the purpose first obtained. So this was written from a king, and it says, God save our king, which was done in 1763. Please note that if this proclamation has ever been broken in Canada and still indeed exists, then a treaty can never be established. The treaty negotiation under purpose laws refers now only to the Constitution Act, formulated in 1982, which has loopholes for a treaty to come and to govern Sliammon if voted by the people. How come treaty refuses to mention the Royal Proclamation Act of 1763? It is still in existence after all. It also was signed by the King himself. How come no one has mentioned this? Makes me wonder. Maybe the Constitution acted as typed in red print. I'm finished. Section 35 also recognizes that the Aboriginal rights are existing. The Supreme Court of Canada has stated that this means that any Aboriginal right that has been extinguished by treaty or other legal possessions prior to 1982 no longer exist and therefore are not protected under the Constitution. The significance of the term existing was further clarified in the case of R.B. Sparrow. I'm almost there. So, Section 35 also applies to the rights in the existence when the Constitution Act of 1982 came into effect. It does not review extinguished rights, and existing Aboriginal right cannot be read as to incorporate the specific manner in which it was regulated in 1982. The phrase existing Aboriginal right was not interpreted correctly so as to permit their evolution over time. So, if treaty goes through, the Constitution Act of 1982 will no longer exist according to them. Unfortunately, I cannot say anything about the sacred old solid proclamation of 1763, since all the treaty negotiations or clauses refuse to mention it. Maybe now you can begin to understand that our voice can make a difference, and we need to no longer be divided, broken, and weak. We need to come together and make a stand for what we have been given, and to cherish it as we can make it grow, but by our means and in our own ways. We cannot afford to lose our status and percentage of our land and even lose our rights and entitlements. This will indeed happen over a span of 10 years if treaty goes through. So much is at stake with voting in a treaty government system. And I just want to make you all aware, now is the time to stand together. Now we can make a difference, a real difference if you wish. And then I have the addresses of the people that you can write to. But we're not ready for a treaty. I'm saying we're not ready. The reason I'm saying we're not ready is because there's so much money mismanagement. We are in deficit of lots of money. And this is not the answer to sell your people. This is selling your people. This is giving your people's rights away. And that is sad because I know that you guys are looking generation. But when you look at generations and stuff, you need to look at your children and all their children and their children all the way down, which is 10 generations down or so. And then generations, so there's so much money mismanagement in Sliammon that there's no help. I'm not putting everything and the treaty, there's people go all the way to the United States to go and buy boats and that when they have a dual treaty and all this sort of stuff, like people go ahead, and this was stopped in 1980. The treaty vote was voted down in 1980, and someone has decided who put that person in that position and why are they in that position, because the people of Sliammon never voted them in. There's people way up there, and there's the poor people of Sliammon. There's people down here that the water line has busted, or a sewer line has busted, and their answer to them was, we cannot help you. So the person moves to town. That has happened to 3 people in Sliammon. Why are they negotiating for a treaty when we cannot help the people of Sliammon? And all the people, I don't care, this is sad, and I'm not putting anybody down, but we are not ready for treaty, because we can't handle the monies we have, and the only ones that have the money are the people that are working in offices, and there's welfare people down here of 10 or 12 children, 12 people in their house, and they get $340.
Can we say our topic, the meeting's supposed to be about treaty, not about...
This is about treaty. There's people down here that get $340 a month on welfare, and they get their child tax benefit. They get penalized for the child tax benefit. That is government money. You cannot penalize somebody for a child tax and cut their welfare down. People can't even support each other down here. There's people down here that get $110 on welfare.
I'd like to just say thank you very much for your comments. to say that, as you said at the beginning of the meeting, this is a tough choice that people are making, and it's important if you have concerns to be able to raise them. So I appreciate the respectful way that you brought your points forward here. I did hear a number of questions that you had in your paper. You were talking about the Royal Proclamations and where those stand in terms of our decisions and how we're moving forward. I heard you ask if there were other options that we should be exploring in making a decision about treaty, and just the general question about deciding whether treaty is for us and are we ready for treaty. I think those are all very valid questions. I've been to a couple of community meetings here before, and I see that what your treaty team and your workers are doing are collecting up those questions and making sure that you have a chance to have that dialogue about it, because those are very important questions that you've raised. So I want for you to know that we've made note of those questions, and for the panel tonight in terms of governance, if any of those discussions can be followed up on. I think some of your treaty staff are making sure that the questions are being recorded and are more than prepared to sit and meet with you and talk about some of those things. So we've got record of your questions.
I'll try to remember some of the questions here, but I'll try to remember some of the questions that you asked here, Sherry. The one thing that I just state is the proclamation that you're celebrating in your letter is actually one of the documents that have pushed us onto this Indian reserve system and allowed for us to have the greater traditional territory owned by the government. So the proclamation you're mentioning is actually going against, from what I understand, it's going against the letter that you prepared. So I just wanted to point that out. And I think that we're moving about this process in the fairest way possible. A full-blown referendum is the fairest thing that we can do. And
We have a referendum. You're asking the chief and council.
no, this is the referendum that was appointed. That matter was brought to the chief and council after this referendum date was set. This referendum has followed all the proceedings that have been required. So I just wanted to share those two things with you. And
Well, I need to ask the question is because the people of Sliammon want to know. You are the chief. You
Yep.
are the chief of Sliammon. You are here to look after the people of Sliammon.
Absolutely.
I have no hardship or anything. I'm only saying that who put the people in position in the treaty office. It is a conflict of interest to have sisters and brothers working together in the treaty office. That is a conflict. There's a lot of conflict going on in Sliammon. There's a list of conflict. I have 300 people or 300 things of complaints of the Sliammon people. I've been going house to house in Sliammon of things that haven't been done for the Sliammon people. If you can't do for the Sliammon people that are asking now, it's so much in deficit. How do you think, if you can't handle the money and treaty goes through, and once you sign that paper, you have to tell the people that we will have nothing, we will have a skid row of Sliammon because of the money's been mismanaged all through the years. For the past 20 years, it's been mismanaged. People are lining their pockets, people are buying their votes, people are going around all the way to the States and that. It is illegal to go and buy votes. It is illegal to put yourself into a position unless you were voted in by the people. And that's upstairs, and I'm not mentioning names, they all know who brothers and sisters are, and it connects all the way, it's all family oriented, and they all stand together, and they vote together, and they bring envelopes this high from the States. Do they really have that much right to vote when they've never set their foot on Sliammon land? They don't even know what it's like in Sliammon. They don't know nothing about Sliammon. They don't know where the back office is, but they have the right to vote.
do you have a question in there somewhere?
So why do people have to sign up? When we vote for chief and council, we vote for chief and
Can
council
you just
because we have our
give me your
status.
question, please? I heard about 10
Why do
or
we
20
have to
different
enroll?
questions here, Sherry. I'd
Why
be
do we
more,
have to enroll to vote for treaty? The people of Sliammon want to know that. Why all of a sudden, when we vote for you or we vote for council, we just need our status number, but through, and I have that in black and white.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the process that was agreed upon by all three parties, and all three parties have agreed upon that. And then when we heard concerns, like you just mentioned, that people did not want to enroll, and then we went back to the province, and we went back to Canada and said, hey, our people do not want to enroll. So we said, why don't we just automatically enroll all of them, just like we do with our band election? And then there was an opposition to that, to say, you're not automatically enrolling me. So we just stuck with the process, and that's how that stayed. So I'm going to move on with the agenda now, Sherry. I'm more than willing to talk to you to the side anytime you like.
They enroll the United States for just enrolling. They go there and get their votes and bring them here.
They're on the Sliammon band list.
We live here and we have to enroll.
They're on the Sliammon band list, Sherry.
Okay, we'll be back.
Okay, thank you very much. I've heard a commitment from Chief Clint to meet with you on band-related items, and I also had a little sidebar with your chief negotiator, who has said that he's more than willing to meet on the side with you and any others with concerns to answer some of the issues that you've raised. So once again, I thank you for your questions. And I also hope a few of the things that you've raised, because others have raised them as well, to your treaty team. That's why they've structured the agenda as they have tonight, because there are a lot of questions out there about how it works after a positive vote, assuming a positive vote. What happens? How do you create your laws? How does financial accountability work in a post-treaty environment? So I think that hopefully that all of these little pieces will start to fall in place and we'll start to answer some of your questions. With regard to the enrollment issue, maybe we've got somebody coming up that can answer some of those questions. The first item on the agenda is about given that you're approaching the voting day, an overview of the voting process. So I'd like to call up a member of the ratification committee team from British Columbia, Lincoln P.
Hello, my name is Lincoln Heaney, and I'm the provincial representative on the ratification committee. The other two representatives who represent Canada and Sliammon, Senator regrets they weren't able to make it this afternoon. The representative for Canada is Ben Claremont, and the Sliammon representative is Marie Claxton, who's the city clerk at Howe River. In the role of the ratification committee, all three of us, we set the rules of procedure in terms of running the vote. We make sure that the vote is open, fair, transparent, and we act impartially. We don't support the treaty, we're not against the treaty, we just make sure that everybody who has the right to vote gets an opportunity to vote. We also make sure that the community has had a reasonable opportunity to review the final agreement, and that's why you see some of the representatives attending the community sessions. One of the rules that we have in terms of the voting process is to set the voting days and the times of the vote, and those are, how we look at that is wherever there are community members in significant numbers, we try to have a polling station there, and so we will be having a polling station in Tacoma, Washington on June the 8th. On June the 11th, there will be a polling station in Victoria. On the 13th in Vancouver. On the 14th in Surrey. And then on the 16th here in the Salish Center. And that will be the final vote day. And at the end of that polling day, the community is welcome to come and witness the counting of the vote. That's all open and transparent. One of the other tasks that we do is to create the official voters list, and that comes from folks who have enrolled and who will be 18 on the last voting day. So if there's anybody who turns 18 on June 16th, they're still able to vote ahead of time because they will be 18 on the last voting day. The official voters list will be made public approximately 30 days before the final vote, and so you can make sure that you're on the official voters list. Because this is such a significant vote for the community, we make sure that we have a variety of options that you can vote. If you're not going to be in town on any of the vote days, we'll be sending you a mail-in ballot package, and we'll be sending that out probably in about a week, so expect to see that in the mail. If you are moving in the next couple of months, please let Noreen Paul know, she's your application staff, and just so we can make sure that we can get a hold of you. So you can vote by mail, which is similar to how you can vote for chief and council elections. You can vote at any of the polling stations, and if any of you think that you're planning on voting in person and you may have trouble getting to the poll, please let the ratification committee know, and we can arrange to have mobile polls done at a time and location of convenience to you. And that's about all I have to say, unless there's some questions. You should have received a letter just giving you a quick update from the ratification committee, letting you know of the vote dates. The rules of procedure and how we operate the vote will be posted on the Treaty Society website for you to review. And that basically is the rules that the committee has put together to ensure an impartial and fair vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lincoln.
I have one more question. There's people down here that work for the treaty and the white man doesn't make what they make. They make $300,000 a year off the land people. I'm serious. It's nothing to laugh about. It will come out eventually. But they're making $300,000 a year at Vancouver. Those people that own 2 condominiums in Vancouver, their houses are all decked out. You can see your face and your floor, their houses are solid oak. So how you get to own 2 condominiums? There's people that are old down here that struggle and they only have the houses, they have a roof over their head, they live day to day on everything, and everybody else has 2 condos and everything's fancy all around them. They never have to worry about money's in their pocket. They have big banquets in Vancouver and they pay people to come there. They pay for all their meals and all their drinks and everything. So how is it, that's the Sliammon people's money that they're spending. We're Sliammon people's money for the poor people.
Just to answer your question, there's nobody in the treaty office making $300,000 a year. You're more than welcome to pick up a copy of the audited financial statements, which were passed already this year. You're more than welcome to come pick up a full package of that, that you can look through. And there's a table on the very last page of the audit that discloses everybody's annual earnings, and that should answer your question.
So what happened to the $22 million or the $26 million that was sent to the treaty office? How come Sliammon people have nothing to do with that? What happened to the Sliammon laws, other reserves and royalties of the reserve that Sliammon people get $50, Palouse gets $35, plus we get $5,000. Sliammon, we should be grateful that we get $50 at Christmas time, which is really nice, I'm sorry. But it is nice, but there is laws going on in Sliammon. That is Sliammon land, Sliammon people's money too, not just the people that are working in the offices. There's a lot of stuff that everybody is lining their pockets. Everybody in Sliammon gets upset about, and it will come out in the end.
So I thought your last question was the one about the wages at treaty, but I could touch on those ones if you want to. We have the Sliammon First Nation general meeting coming up here in this building, May 1st. The audited financial statements will be presented. And to answer your question about the dividends, we don't have to do that. The monies that are coming in are own source revenue, but guess where that own source revenue is going? That own source revenue is going towards fixing houses and keeping programs
There's no
around.
houses being fixed out in Sliammon. A sewer line just broke and the girl got kicked out.
That house was condemned. You should do some fact finding.
I've been to houses and there's electrical wires.
Okay, Sherry, that's enough. You've had the floor long enough. We're moving on with the agenda. And like I said,
You're lying to your own people.
I'm not. And you know where all these answers are? Or in the audited financial statements, which I will gladly give you a full copy of. And I'm going to leave it at that.
House with electric wires like this. I took pictures of it. I took pictures of the things up there. I took pictures of an elder. We look after our elders. What about that elder?
Sherry, at the risk of being disrespectful, I think that people have come to hear about the agenda tonight. We have heard your questions, and I've heard your chief counselor and your chief negotiator all offer to sit with you and any others to continue to answer those questions. So once again, we thank you for coming and ask if we can sort of respect our agenda and move on and hopefully start answering some of those questions. So having said that, we're going to move into a panel now, governing ourselves under treaty. And as I said, your treaty team tried to put together some presentations and pull together some information that might help the citizens of Sliammon start to think about what life might be like and how you go about putting your systems in place and getting ready for the day when you once again become self-governing. It is an exciting time to think about taking that power back and being able to develop your own rules and laws. So our first speaker will be Roy, who will talk about the Sliammon Constitution and governance.
Thank you, Angela. I want to stand by, feel more comfortable standing. I want to talk really generally about the changes that we're recommending are bringing into Sliammon with a final agreement. I think we all know Sliammon currently lives under an Indian Act. I've talked about that idea over and over. The Indian Act was created in the 1800s. When it was created, it created the notion of Indian reserves. The day we fell under the Indian Act was the day that we lost connection with the territories outside of our reserve. So one of the things really fundamentally is we want to get rid of that Indian Act. We want to get rid of that confinement of being on reserve. We want to get rid of that notion of being managed by a federal government. We've all heard the idea of an Indian agency. The Indian Act today puts us in a position where we can't make our own decisions about land management, about how we manage our land resources. We have to go ask the Indian agent for his permission to manage our own affairs. And it doesn't take you don't have to be very smart to figure out, that's just a bad place to be, and there's no reason for us to be there. Like, you don't need anybody protecting our affairs on our behalf. There's nobody better to do that than us ourselves. We elect our own leadership, and we have confidence and faith in our leadership to look after our interests. When our leadership responds to questions, that's accountability. Everybody in this room has the right to ask questions about our governance, about how we operate, about how we spend money. That's your right to do. And that's a really important principle. Like, Sherry, all the questions that you're asking, they deserve to be answered. And what that's about is accountability. It makes our government accountable to our citizens. With the Indian Act, that accountability isn't to our citizens, it's to the Indian Agent, it's to the Department of Indian Affairs. So one of the things that changes with the treaty is we become self-governing. You don't go upstairs and tell, Grandpa when you're angry with us. You tell us directly. You tell our leadership directly, and our leadership is responsible for being accountable. Our leadership responds. They explain how budgets are being used. They explain how activities are taking place. They explain how decisions are made, and they explain to our Sliammon community. So that fundamentally is a change. We become responsible for ourselves. The treaty that's been negotiated, it's an agreement that's been negotiated by Sliammon for Sliammon. It has Sliammon input into it. The maps that are drawn out on the walls, that comes from information provided to us by our Sliammon people. We talked about the idea of, elders, the number of people that we've lost in the last short months, in the last 2 years, the last 10 years. Those elders left us with really valuable information about who we are. They left us with really valuable information about where our territories are. The information that's captured in the maps in our territories were provided to us by Sliammon. It wasn't any Indian agent that came and drew a line on the map and said, that's yours now. That came from us. That came from your uncles, came from your grandpas, it came from people in your families, came from this community. I heard questions about conflict and people being related to one another, only certain people benefiting from work that happens in the community. I think that's just wrong. I believe there are rules, there are conflict of interest policies for the nation overall. They're responsible for the
How
policies.
is it wrong, Roy? You make $800 a day,
Excuse
plus you
me, excuse me, I have the floor, you had enough, please sit.
No,
You-
you
you-
need
you-
to ask
you-
the
you
question.
talk-
Do
you
not
talked
make
about-
$800 a
You
day
talked about
from
how
the
important,
Sliammon
you
people.
talked about how important it is to be heard. It's my turn to be
You
heard.
make $800 a day, answer the question off the Sliammon
Yeah.
people.
If that's the question, you have that information, it's just not true.
No, I need you to answer the question in front of the
I
Sliammon people.
answered it. You asked me if
What?
you asked me if I made $800 a day, and I answered.
For an
I said-
advisor.
Yeah, and I said, no, I don't make $800 a day, that's bad information. Your question is answered. You
So
don't
how
have
is
to,
it that you
you
own
don't,
two
you
condominiums?
don't have to yell at me. You can ask the question
How is
like
it that you own
on
two condominiums,
individual.
Roy?
Sorry?
You are an advisor, you are a chief negotiator.
And-
You are making hundreds of dollars off the Sliammon people.
What is your
And
question?
in the end, we're gonna pay taxes to the Sliammon band.
What's
For
your
living
question?
here, why should we pay to live on our own land that's been here for 100 years to the Sliammon band because treaty goes through?
If you have a question, I will answer it.
Well, then
Like,
answer it, why should we pay?
If it's a discussion, we can set some time aside for you and any group of people that you're
Why can't
interested
you
in
answer the
coming
question
together.
in front of
Why
the
don't you
people?
let him answer the question instead of
Why don't
answering
you
the
stay
question?
out of it because you're in big trouble
Let him
too?
answer his question. Let him answer the question.
You should watch what you say, Denise, because you're the head of it.
You should too. Everybody knows what you do out of your house, Sharon.
What?
Everybody knows what you're doing.
I don't care. I don't carry stacks of tens and hundreds and 20s like this. I pay people to vote.
Sherry, I'd love to sit down with you and address some of your questions if you want to have a group session or anything, but tonight we're here to celebrate land transfers that this entire nation is getting, and our elders are here to celebrate those land transfers with us. And we also have some very respected out-of-town guests here from the Manaw First Nation that we invited here to speak. And I would like to be respectful to these people and let them come here to do what they needed to do. And any one of us would be happy to sit down with you and get this information later on.
Thank you. Thank you. So, trying to get back on track. My discussion is about Sliammon Constitution. It's been a lot of work gone into developing a constitution, bringing that constitution to the community. There's been a long series of sessions to gather input on that constitution. That constitution has been brought to the community, and the community was asked to vote on it. That constitution is approved, and that constitution now becomes a building block for building our government into the future. The Constitution sets out lawmaking requirements. There's a lot of questions about finances. The Constitution is very specific to the financial responsibilities, the reporting responsibilities of our government to our nation. And that principle is built in at the direction, at the instruction, at the approval of the Sliammon nation. So we hear the question very loud and clear, like how are we going to manage our finances? How are we going to manage our financial affairs? How are we going to be accountable to the Sliammon community? The answer to those questions begins with its constitution. It's a requirement that those laws be built, and they will be built. There is no choice. So having said that, a big part of our government is about building those laws. And some of our discussions tonight are going to be around that law building process. We're going to be building laws about financial management, about financial accountability. There's going to be laws around land management, land responsibilities, and there's going to be laws in all wage areas. But the biggest source of, I guess, concern is about the security of our finances in the future. So governance is very much about building those laws. We move out of that place where it's governed under the rules and regulations of the Indian Act. There are virtually no rules under the Indian Act. So it's an effort to build those rules, and those rules built are needing the input, needing the involvement, needing the understanding of the Sliammon membership. And I think some of the questions that are being asked are about that. It's about building those laws and about building that security, about how we manage our affairs. And the foundation that all of those things are built on are our Constitution. So we have that now in hand. We have a requirement to build laws. and some of our presenters today are going to be talking about that process of building laws. We have the benefit of tables that have been through that experience. Watson has established their laws, built their laws, have them approved. We all have built those laws, established those laws, and have them approved. We're not having to start from scratch. We have experiences that are in front of us that we can benefit a great deal from. And that's where I believe we're going as a community. And that's what we're here to explain to you. And there is no wrong questions to be asking. I think it's about just asking in a respectful way and being heard in a respectful way. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish tonight. So that's what as much as I want to speak to at this point. I am available to be answering questions, and I want to pass the mic to our Senator.
Thank you very much, Roy. I'm going to try to power up the machine. I need your help desperately. Maybe what I'll do while Eileen's getting my machine set up here is briefly introduce probably somebody that most of you won't know in the room. This is John Jack. He's a council member for the Howe First Nation. I'm proud to say I watched John grow through this process and grow up through this process. As young as he is, he started with the Howe First Nation as part of our Constitution Committee a long number of years ago now. I was the chair of the committee and was happy to have John with some new blood on that committee, so he'll introduce himself further as we go along, but John has got a lot of experience in the things that you're going through. He's also worked in communications during our ratification process. He was our eligibility and enrollment coordinator, and now he's an elected member of council on his second term. So he was a council member pre-treaty and also a council member in our first election post-treaty. So John and I had a discussion on the way over, and John likes to have the last word, so I'll give it to him tonight. So I'll make a presentation on lawmaking then, before John goes into a presentation on financial accountability. And my suspicion is that the handout that you have will be different in order in a couple of places than what I'm going to present to you, but all the slides are in there. So one of the things that Tom and members have been asking to your treaty team as they've been going around within the community here in Vancouver, in Tacoma, and Victoria, and visiting your members wherever they live, is how does this all work after ratification? Assuming that we have a positive vote in treaty, there's a lot of work ahead of you in terms of preparing for the effective date. In our case, I think the effective date was 3 years after our ratification. There was a number of reasons why it was that length of time, and I won't get into those now. But during that period of time, we had teams of people, and a lot of them were our community people, working to get us ready for our post-treaty world. We had to do things like prepare our laws. We had to look at our organization and make sure that it fit with the new governing powers that we were coming to us under treaty. I'm going to give you right now a really brief overview of the process that we went through in Mono, just to give you an idea of what is going to happen or what would happen in your community if you vote in favor of your treaty. So to start with, the basis of your lawmaking, the reason that you make laws and where you get the authority to make your laws comes from 3 places, and I have to say I'm not a lawyer, so there's lawyers in the room. I don't need any arguments about this. I'm doing my best. So it's going to come from the treaty. The treaty itself has got a number of lawmaking authorities, acknowledging what your abilities and authorities are to make laws to govern yourselves in your community. As Roy just mentioned, your Sliammon Constitution is key in making your laws, and I really appreciate the words that Roy came up with. It was something that we really realized the value of our Constitution, and I think we spent 7 years in our community working on our Constitution, and it all came back to that. Every answer, when we were going through ratification, when we were developing our laws, it all came back to the Constitution. And the Constitution was built by our citizens, so we always felt really good about that we were really grounded in our community, in that lawmaking process. The third area that we looked at in developing our laws was the rule of law, and I'll talk about that in some slides to come up. So first of all, the first area is your common treaty. Your treaty specifically confirms and recognizes your inherent right to self-government, that right that you always knew that you had to govern yourself. I was talking to somebody earlier who was telling me where your occupied territories were at one point in your history, and the fact that you numbered 10,000. You can't have a community and a nation of 10,000 people and not have rules and laws in place. So you had the right to govern yourselves. You did govern yourselves. And what you're going to be doing now is reinstating that right. So the treaty that's been negotiated, the final agreement as it's called now, recognizes and identifies over 40 areas where you'll be able to develop your own laws. After effective date and starting on the effective date, you're going to decide which of those areas you're going to take on lawmaking powers in. That was something in our community that people were really fearful of because there were so many lawmaking powers in there. They worried that we would have to take on all of those things on the effective date, and that wasn't the case. So you'll see in your handout, this is just a very abbreviated version, and I did a quick look down through your treaty to see where you had lawmaking authorities, and I counted, I think it was about 43 or something like that. So there's a document in the treaty office that starts to do that analysis if you're interested in looking at that. But if you look at the slides, the handouts that you have there, these are the general areas where you have lawmaking authority under the final agreement. Governance and financial, land use planning, access, traffic and transportation, water and water license, forest resources, environment, harvesting of wildlife, fisheries, migratory birds, and say plant gathering, not plant gathering, citizenship, adoption, child protection, health services, and Aboriginal healers, family and social services, language and culture, K-12 education, liquor control, solemnization of marriages, emergency preparedness, regulation of business, public order, the list goes on and on. So there's actually that compilation, some of them I've gathered together, but it gives you an idea of the scope of lawmaking authorities that you'll have as you decide to take them down. You don't need to take on those authorities right away. So going back then to the constitutions, I can talk a little bit more about our own personal experiences. Just so you know, the Monarch Treaty has got 5 independent First Nations in it. My own First Nation, Howe, is one of them. There are 4 other nations that signed on under the same treaty. But each of them is their own independent government. Each of them has their own set of laws, their own government, their own way of doing business. So it's a very interesting process to go through in looking at developing laws for 5 nations all at the same time. So our first step when we were developing our own laws was to have our citizens agree on how our future government would be structured and will operate. So the structure, for a large part, came out of our Constitution. It said how we wanted to govern ourselves. That was our primary document. And we always said when we talked about our Constitution, we reminded our citizens that that is our highest law of our land. There's no law that we can create that can't be in line, out of line with the Constitution. The Constitution rules in our community. So when we went through the Constitution process of developing our Constitution, our citizens were clear with us, as you're being clear here tonight about what you wanted to see in your future. You want to have a say in decisions that affect your nation. You want fairness in your government and your community. You want financial accountability. You want control over who are members, who are citizens of your nation. You want your government to make good decisions and have good decision-making processes in place. And you want transparency and accountability back to your people. And over and above all of that, you want your government to work towards a vision for all of Sliammon. You're here to make a better world for your future generations. So those were what was underlying our lawmaking process. So the rule of law was something that we got to learn about. None of us were lawyers, so all of us sort of struggled through and did a lot of learning in the process. But one of the things that we learned about is the rule of law. And when we talked about that to our citizens, it first felt like it was, in our word, it's mamahi. It comes from the, sort of, I guess, respect from the white man's world. But you know, we thought about it when we developed our Constitution. We said we had those laws in place. We never lived in a society that wasn't governed by rules and laws. And in our world, as it probably was in yours, there were very severe consequences in some cases for breaking those rules. So I think we can all remember that. I think our grandparents have probably shared a lot of stories with us about that. So another underlying principle of all of our laws and our lawmaking is that no one is above the law. That includes staff, that includes leadership, that included our hereditary leaders and our citizens. Everybody is subject to the same law. So just some background principles of the rule of law were applied in our law development, and some of the things that are included in the rule of law They have to be accessible, understandable, clear, and predictable. They have to apply equally to all. They have to protect fundamental human rights. They should be able to resolve questions of legal rights. Not just done at somebody's discretion. People have to understand how the laws work and how they apply. Provide processes to resolve disputes without major cost or delay. You don't want to make yourself go bankrupt resolving disputes. The laws need to be implemented and enforced reasonably, in good faith, and for the purposes for which the powers were given to public officials. And the laws need to provide for adjudicated procedures for resolving disputes and appeals that are fair to all. So there's nobody that thought, your government doesn't have the end-all say. There's always got to be an ability for citizens to come back and look for some redress or an ability to appeal what the laws say. Most important to us when we were developing our laws is we looked at our rule of law. What are our highest principles? In our community, we talk about ethos, respecting everything around us, respecting people, respecting our environment and our lands. Very, very strong principle that we apply, and we call that our rule of law. Is there any lawyers in the room? I suspect I'll get myself in trouble trying to explain some of these things. One of the things that we heard from our members a lot was that, well, what we're creating is a municipality, that our governments, our First Nations governments, are going to be the same as municipalities. The advice that we got from our lawyers was not that. Our lawyers tell us the way we're structured under the Constitution is that we are actually a third order of government. So I don't know how well we can see here, but we've got over here the Constitution provides Section 91 that talks about federal powers and federal jurisdiction, and that's where the laws of Canada come in. Technology. I'm going to screw it up today. And Section 92 of the Constitution deals with provincial jurisdiction, so that's why Canada has authority over some things, BC has authority over other things. Under Section 92, there are provincial laws. Under provincial laws, there are municipalities and regional districts, and then bylaws under that. So municipalities are actually, as I understand, a creation of provincial law. They're not recognized in the Constitution themselves. What we have in First Nations community is Section 35, which recognizes the Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations people. And that's where our treaty jurisdiction then comes in. So our Constitution, in your case, this would be the Common Constitution, falls as a third order of government, and all of your laws fall underneath there. So you're not talking about a municipal style of government, you're actually talking about a third order of government. So the next thing I'll try to go over fairly quickly is determining we call them our core laws. We recognize that we have, I think in our treaty, we have 33 areas specifically that say we can make laws in those areas. So our first thing that we had to do was to go through all of those laws and say, okay, which ones do we want to put off until later? Which ones do we need now so that we can have accountable government in place, that we can set that foundation before we start dabbling into the things that are affecting our people's lives? We don't want to deal with child protection and adoption laws and those kind of things until we're sure that our government is really solid. So we went through a process of deciding which laws we wanted to take down first. So the first question you ask yourself is why develop laws? Because a lot of our people are saying, oh my God, we had the Indian Act and it was horrible, it was a horrible piece of legislation, and we lived under that for 150 years. And now you want us to talk about imposing laws on ourselves. Well, once again, we never lived in societies where we didn't have rules and laws. So laws are needed so that governments have the authority to take action, that they can fund and operate programs, they can employ individuals to carry out government programs and services, provide benefits to citizens, and to regulate activities as may be required for good government. This was drilled into us by our legal team. There should be no government action without legislative authority to do so. And that's a comfort to citizens, because that lets you know that unless there's a law that you've been made aware of that is clear and open under the rule of law, your government can't just go and do whatever it wants. It has to act according to the laws. So that's something that gives protection and some comfort to citizens. Governments have to exercise authority according to written, publicly disclosed laws that have been adopted and enforced according to established procedure. So there needs to be due process when you put the laws in place as well. For the question, which laws now, which laws later, as I said, we went through a process of asking questions and answering for ourselves which laws we thought were most important to put in place first. So our objective in creating laws was to not overwhelm ourselves. We chose a period of 2 years. And we said, okay, let's try to think through a period of 2 years of becoming self-governing again, all of the changes that we're going to have to get used to and the things that we might have to do a bit differently. So our objective was to create a regime of laws that would authorize our governments to do what they needed to do for the first 2 years after treaty. We recognize that we can pass laws anytime after effective date. So let's just start with the basics. Let's get those foundational laws in place so that we can all feel that we have a good, solid government in place. Our aim in doing that was to achieve the results of certainty for everyone, transparency, credibility, and responsible government. I suspect that John will talk to you a little bit about the Harvard project on Indian economic development. And those are the foundations. The Harvard project said that if you have a good government, solid government in place that people can trust, people will come and invest in your community. It's a very broad overview of what that says, but it's so true. You know, if people think that the rules are going to change tomorrow, they're not going to want to come and invest in your community. So solid governance is really, really important. So the core laws that we developed, we categorized them into 3 really general, just so that we can make it easier for ourselves to understand it. We said we're going to create governance laws, and those will be laws that govern our government. And those are the majority of laws that we put in place. I've heard a lot of concerns here, as we heard in our communities, where people say, no, the council's going to take away, they're going to run away with all the money. And this is one of the things that we said we need first and foremost. We need laws so that our people understand these aren't necessarily laws that are going to be imposed on our citizens. They're laws that are imposed on the government itself. The laws say what the government can and can't do. So those are really fundamental pieces. We also had a group of laws that we called involving our citizens, because we knew that our citizens needed to be involved and have a say in a lot of the workings of government. So those laws were laws that made sure that the citizens always have a say. And the third set of laws were about protecting lands and resources. They were laws about how our lands and resources can be protected and how they can be accessed and how they can be used. So there's a list of each of those core laws. We developed, most of the 5 First Nations developed a set of about 14 laws to begin with. So the governance laws that I talked about, the laws that govern government, were the Government Act, the Council Rules of Order and Procedures Act, Administrative Decisions Review Act, the Elections Act, and the Referendum Act. Involving citizens, actually now that I look at it, I think we moved these around as we went along, but involving citizens, the Financial Administration Act, the Citizenship Act, the Integrity Act, which is actually a Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest Act, the Government Personnel Act, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy, and under Protecting Lands and Resources, we developed a Land Act and a Planning and Land Use Management Act, Resource Harvesting, and Environmental Protection Act. So in the view of the First Nations that went through this exercise, we thought that these 14 laws would provide us with a good basis for moving forward and to help us get through the first 2 years after treaty and really get ourselves on a solid footing. So why these laws? I probably already said I do this all the time. The core laws make sure that there are enforceable laws, that there are rules in place, so that our government is accountable and acts in a fair and consistent manner in relation to matters of government and the rights and obligations of citizens, so that our citizens have a say in matters that affect them and the nation as a whole, and that our lands and resources are protected and there are rules in place for anyone, citizens or non-citizens, wishing to access our precious resources. So I just want to give you a couple of examples. I'm not going to go through every law, but just to give you a bit of an idea of what some of those main laws are, those questions that kept coming up about accountability, especially. One of the things that all of the nations did in some fashion was we included a preamble to all of our laws, and to me that really added the heart to what we were doing. The preambles of the Act talk about why we want to have these laws in place, and it's in every Act that was brought into place on effective date. So this is an excerpt, it's not the whole thing. But the preamble of the Government Act says, for one of the nations, it is the desire of the Mano First Nation government to govern in a manner that is responsible, transparent, democratic, and accountable, blending historic and modern-day government institutions. In doing so, our governing structures honor our past and embrace the future, ensuring the continued existence of our Mano First Nation as a strong political, social, and cultural community that aspires to grow as an organized, determined, successful, and self-reliant people. So that really added a lot of heart to what we were doing and what we wanted to do with each of the laws. So I think I've got to go over about 5 of the acts, some of the key acts. The Government Act that we have, just to give you an example of what's in it, and these are lengthy acts, they probably range from 10 pages to, I think the Financial Administration Act is 100 pages or something. I confess to not having read the whole thing to our finance chair. So the Government Act answers questions like, how is our government structured? Who does what in the government structure? Really, really important. And I have to say that in our first year, that's probably been our biggest struggle, is making sure that people aren't overstepping their boundaries. Our council members should be council members, our staff should be staff, and we need to understand how we operate within that government. So it's been a continued learning experience, I think, for us. The Government Act also talks about how and when government meetings take place. They need to be open and transparent, so our members know when our executive council is meeting, what their agendas are. There's requirements for posting things in advance and doing things online. How are decisions made and reported has to be very open. The Government Act also contains our oath of office for elected and appointed officials. And it was really powerful at our first assembly, our first People's Assembly that we had, to have every one of our government members or committee members to stand before the people and take the oath. They had to take it when they started their positions, and our laws require that they also retake that oath at every People's Assembly. So it's really powerful, reminding you of what your responsibilities to the nation are. One more point. The Government Act also provides guidelines for non-citizen involvement. Another act that is really critical, I think, to some of the questions that are coming forward here is, does your council, your government have the final say in everything? Is there a process for appeal? People always want to know that they can go somewhere else and say, I don't think something was done right. So all of our communities have some sort of a tribunal, or in this case, there's an Administrative Decisions Review Act. So this act provides a dispute resolution process that is accessible, affordable, understandable, and practical through a process that encourages that disputes or complaints be resolved quickly in both terms of hearing and deciding on the complaint. So you can't bring a complaint to the tribunal and wait 3 years for the result. The law actually requires that these things happen quickly. And also provides a fair opportunity and consistent process for all parties to reach final resolution on matters under review. So it's meant to be an independent body that looks at disputes that people have against administrative decisions of the nation. Another act that's really critical to everybody is the Financial Administration Act. Probably self-explanatory what's in the Financial Administration Act, but they get very detailed in terms of when your budgets have to be done, how people are supposed to be involved in the budgeting process, what kind of thought has to go into it, what kind of considerations need to be taken. In our community, we have something that's in our Government Act that is called a best practices policy. So it tells our government officials what they have to consider when they're making decisions about budgets or anything else in the nation. So the Financial Administration Act obviously governs the management and control of your First Nations finances. It establishes a framework and processes for managing your financial resources, make sure there's efficient and effective use of financial resources, and it sets the requirements for transparency and accountability. The reporting is to our citizens, not to INAC. And it enables the nation to meet our internal and external financial reporting obligations. Code of conduct and conflict of interest, and some nations call it the Integrity Act. This governs the conduct of government officials, elected employees, volunteers. It ensures that government officials perform their public duties with honesty and integrity. It promotes public confidence and trust, and it protects against waste and inefficiency. Maybe a bit hand in hand with this act is the Government Act, which talks about the roles of government, and also there's a Government Personnel Act that talks about hiring practices and how that's to be done within the nation. The last act that I'll go over is the Land Act. It deals with the ownership of and interest in treaty settlement lands, controls how interest in treaty settlement lands are granted, and talks about long-term interest in treaty settlement lands, and the fact that they have to be decided by a referendum. So there are things throughout our government decisions that are made. It's actually specified in the Act where you need to go back to citizens to get approval to do certain things. So those are the only acts that I was going to go over, but each of our First Nations is required to have a public registry, so these pieces of legislation, it was intense, man. Holy, you learn a lot during that process. So the first level of input that we had, each of our communities had what we called legislation review committees. So those are made up of, in some cases, they were people who were on the negotiating team, community members who really encouraged people who had an interest in areas. In our community, we have people that are so interested in finance. We said, come on in, sit on this committee, because people need to know that you're satisfied with this. So we really encouraged a lot of community involvement in that. So most of the communities had at least 3 legislative review committees. One would be lands and resources, one would be governance, one would be finance. Some of them had more. Some of them were all the same committee because some of our communities are really small. So those were the committees that delved into things. They asked a million questions. I was on a couple of those committees myself, but if there were questions to be asked, I asked it, and that's a chance to do it, to create that understanding of what these laws are going to do. We had a legal team. I think we had about 3 lawyers that specialized in different areas that helped us to develop our laws. They drafted the legislation, and most importantly, they took direction from our committees. So the whole process of developing laws started out with our legal team providing us on each of the acts that we were going to develop a list of about 50 questions. They had, in some cases, they had some options so that we could help to understand the context of them, but basically those went to the community. We always said during our ratification process, one of the things that we found is it's way easier to find the answers than it is to find the questions. Because we have the answers in our community. Bottom line, we know our communities, we know why it is that we're doing this. But we always can find those answers if we don't keep them up. I think there's one more time. So the legal team did a lot of back and forth. We changed our mind a lot. So we sent it back to the lawyers, have them redraft it. Because we were learning from each other as we went along. So it was a real extensive and learning process. The other part of the structure was the community. Once our communities started developing the laws, they started taking shape. Most of our communities had a community round, similar to what we're doing now, to go out and talk about how the laws were being developed, to talk to our members, to say, this is how it's going to work. What do you think about this? So they had opportunity to help us change our minds again, so we sent things back to the lawyers. But it was an ongoing process, and we did have really good feedback, I think, from our members in terms of coming out and helping us to develop those laws. The process, I think I described it already. The legal team prepared a list of 50 or 100 questions for us to answer in terms of how we wanted those laws to look. They took the input and the direction on those policy questions back and drafted up the legislation. They drafted templates, so we get the first round was a real rough draft. They take those 50 questions they asked and they plug them into something that started looking like a law. So we were actually watching the laws get developed, and we would review and re-review and change our minds and talk things out and research things that we wanted to know or ask our lawyers questions about how it would work. And once we've done that, as I said, then we started doing the community consultation and looking at input and suggestions, further suggestions from our citizens. That's all. Let's go. So I think we'll have general questions and answers afterwards, but maybe I'll ask John to carry on because his topic is related. As I said, I'll reintroduce John. I told you a little bit about him. one of our prides in Howatt, a young man who's really taken it on, and we count on him a lot. He does a lot of research and went to school and got his education, and we're very thankful that he came back to our Howatt community and he played a really vital role in our community. So I'm always glad to introduce him and stand alongside him.
Thank you, Angela. Hello, my name is John. I'd like to thank the Sliammon people for allowing me to give this presentation here. I'd like to say hello to Minister Polak and the government of Sliammon. I see some representatives from Canada and BC, and there may still be representatives from the city itself. I saw that the mayor had to step out, so too bad. Oh, hi, sorry, I'll speak up. So just to give a bit of background on myself, I went to school in 2001, to VIU actually, and I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Global Studies, which was mostly economics and political science. Thank you. And my experience with the Howatt First Nation started, as Angela said, with the Constitution Committee. So one of the things that they did with the Constitution was a survey was basically mandated out to the people. And at that point, when I got the survey, I just completed a social research course. So I took out the red pen and changed a lot of the questions. Basically said, I can help, and I got a call. So they actually got me in. And that was back in 2005 or 2006. And I got more and more involved. And I've been involved in some way since then, in treaty, in ratification. I actually started over there. That group is where I started. I started in communications and eligibility and enrollment, and I've kind of gone from there up to a point where I now am an elected member of council for my First Nation. I hold the portfolios of finance, economic development, and I'm also the representative of my nation in the Alberta Regional District. So, in any event, moving on, I think the one thing that I want to start off with is that self-government is important. You know, it's one of the main contributors to success, and the one thing that is the job of any government is to make the life of its people better. And that's really the job. The reason we have communities is because people work together and they make their lives better by cooperating with each other. And as a result, when you have a group of people together, you have community resources. And you have to have ways to figure out how you're going to use those community resources. And if you all agree on how something should be used, that's awesome. You don't have to have a government. You don't. But when there are disagreements, you need to have a government. And there are different forms of government. But I agree with Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst, except for all the other ones. And as a result, we have an elected government, and we make decisions because we're accountable to the people. And what you're in now is under the Indian Act regime. So you're not accountable to, or the government, and I'm on government, I am. Back then I was not accountable to my people. I was accountable to the Minister of Indian Affairs, who at the time I think was Jim Prentice. Ultimately, we didn't really have to listen to the people. Not technically, we did, but we didn't have to. And that doesn't sit well with anyone when you learn that. So this is something that treaty allows you to have, the self-government. And I'll get to why this matters for finance, is when you're sitting here wondering, yes, life is not going well. But the reason why life is not going well is because of the regime. It's because of the Indian Act. Something is not working with that, and hasn't probably for 150 years. So you have three choices in front of you. You have do nothing and hope it all gets better. And given the current economic climate, and given the fact that governments are looking to reduce their budget, I don't think we're going to see more money from the government just by wishing for it. Any government. The other option, and the Crown loves this one, litigation, going to court, getting a judge to say, that's what we should do. Thing is, going to court takes forever, and the result isn't guaranteed. And very often, and I think if we go this route, if we had gone this route, the decision would have been, okay, you guys sit down and negotiate what you're going to do. So the third option is negotiation, which is what a treaty is about. You negotiate the deal. You have your elected leaders and your people providing consultation to the elected leaders to basically go after the things you want. And I'm proud to say that our government at the time went and got what we needed. What we needed. That's important. In any event, I'll keep going forward here, and I'll actually get to the part about finance. Money. Money, money, money. Money is the mother's milk here. Money is what we're talking about. Money funds programs and services for health, education, welfare, other types of things. The basis of civilization, sewer, water. All of these things need to be paid for in some way. We do get funding in the Kuwait experience. You get funding from the government for these things, but that number is not going up except by inflation rate. So you have to find more ways to use that money better and get more money. So let's stop here and realize that on the effective date of the treaty, you will have money. You have a lot of money by some accounts to do things. And it will be coming in, and you have to make a decision on how that money is going to be used. And that's where your government comes in. The government you elect, they make the decisions on how that money is used under the law. So if you get a say as a people, you get a say. And the first say you get is electing them. And I think that's the most important part that we all need to remember is that you guys get to vote on who makes decisions. So you want to elect the best decision makers you can. And at that point, it might not matter what their last name is. And I think that's important to remember, that you want the best decision makers in place so that your chance at making a better life for yourselves goes up. And there are different ways to go about it. I mean, people will disagree. And ultimately, the way you decide where you're going to go is by voting for the people you think will do it best. And that may change from year to year. So, now we come down to money. You'll have money. There are three different types of money you'll be getting if you vote yes for the treaty. Implementation funds, which is the money you will use to set up your government. You will get annual funding for the actual operation of your government. This is all this type of stuff that we've been getting too. And then you'll get lump sum capital money that you use to either invest or build infrastructure in your community. So all of this stuff, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of things you need to use to make your lives better. Now let's assume you have a plan. Let's assume there's a government in place and they have a bunch of decisions that they want to make. And so how are they going to go about doing it? Well, you have the Financial Administration Act, you have the Constitution, you have a set of rules that say the government can only do a certain amount within these boundaries. The purpose of law is to limit government. That's the purpose. Because you don't want a government that has too much power, because then that's very corrupting. At that point, what we should do is look to the types of things that you can do with the money you have. I'll start with programs and services, because everybody gets affected by those things. Let's talk about dental, eyeglasses, that type of thing, as well as sewer, water, housing being fixed, housing being provided. All that takes money. So there's a source of money for that, but that money doesn't go up or down unless you make proper decisions to use that money more effectively. And when I say use the money more effectively, think of it this way. You go to the corner store and you buy a can of Coke with a certain amount of money. I don't know what it is, I buy bottles of Coke. But let's say it's $1. If you buy 6 cans of Coke, you divide that by 6, it actually ends up being less. And you keep doing that, you buy a case, it's even less per can. And that's the whole theory of government, is that you pool your money together, you have buying power, and you can get services cheaper than if you bought it yourself. And we can definitely see that when we compare our health system to Americans. You know, they pay a lot of money per person for their health system compared to Canada. And that's just because we do it collectively. And that's what the towels, you have water that's the cheapest in the world and all that sort of thing. And then moving on from there, you also have things, you have a lump sum of money that you can use to invest. So this is something that we've done, because we know we have a source of money that will contribute to programs and services, but unless we invest that money and make more over time, that amount is not going to provide for us 20 years in the future, because we're going to have 300 more people. So we have to invest the money smartly to make more money than if it just sat in a bank account and the number didn't really change. So one thing that we've done is we've not only invested or are planning to invest a significant portion of our money with financial institutions. We're buying stocks, bonds, mutual funds, type stuff. And what that will do is provide us income. So just for example, say you have $1 million. At 5%, that means that $1 million grows by $50,000 every year. Now, if you do that for 20 years, you double your money. And the thing is, that's better than just leaving it in a bank account. So if you invest your money, you'll make a better return. And hopefully, the amount of money you make is ahead of the amount of people or the population growth, because then you can at least maintain the same level of service. But the whole plan is to improve people's lives. So what we need to do is make even more money than just enough to maintain everything. And the way you do that is by investing smartly, but also investing in businesses. And that's what we've done. The Howatt First Nation owns a forestry company, and we own other types of businesses as well. And the reason we got into business is not just employment. We do employ a significant number of our own people with our businesses, but we're looking for profit. And the reason why is because that profit will be sent to the First Nations so that we can increase our spending in health and education and other types of programs and services. That's the plan. Now there's an element of risk in business because you can't really guarantee that you're going to make money, but usually if you do it right, you'll make more money than if you just let it sit in a bank. Now, the one thing that I think I want to talk about finally, and I kind of did this backwards than how I was originally planning, but Angela mentioned I was going to say something about the Harvard Project. Now, the Harvard Project is something headed up out of Harvard, obviously, but the whole working idea is that the people who are best suited to make their lives better are the people themselves. So the government we have before treaty, the one we had before was accountable to Ottawa. So even if they have the best of intentions, and a lot of them do, they're not here, they don't see what needs to get done. They may not approve something even though it may be what we need. So if you elect the people who will make the decisions that need to be made, that gives you a better chance of making your life better. And that's what the treaty gives you. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all for everything. It's a set of tools that you didn't have before, and you won't have if you go any other route. Now that's personal opinion. Okay? It's my personal opinion. This is a good set of tools to make your life better. And the way that you hold government accountable is by having laws that they can't break. And that takes responsibility, but that takes a watchful eye. And one of the things you can do, and this is something that we've done, is demand that every government, when they plan to use money, create budgets for that money. Budgets are just plans for spending money. So if, like we just completed a budget ourselves, we're about to publish it for our people so they can see what our plan for our money is going to be, so that they can hold us accountable at the end of the year. And the way that they do that is by looking at our financial statements as they're published every quarter, but more importantly, looking at the financial statements that were audited by a third party. And that's something that you do already, but that's a very important, perhaps one of the most important things that we have to keep our government accountable to us, is by coming up and selecting someone, an accountant's firm or something like that, to say, look at their books, see if they've actually done what they said they were going to do. And actually tell us whether or not they did a good job. And if they didn't, let us know. If money is just suddenly not there, let us know. And these firms will do it. Accounting firms will do it. They'll take a look at the books and go, something's not right here, what happened? And then they'll report on that to you, because they're accountable to you, not us. That's why AGMs, you select an auditor. They hold the government responsible. So, the other thing that we will do and have done in the past is that we involve our own people in our financial decision making. We let them know what we're planning to do and we give them an opportunity for feedback. And this is something that I will assume is in the Sliammon plan as well. So if you have a government that's planning to spend money, they have to tell you what they're planning on doing with it. And you can provide feedback saying, I don't think you should invest in this business. I think you should go fix the sewer. And if the government agrees with you, then they'll do it. Because they understand that if they don't do what the people want, they're out of a job. And that's why an elected government is supposed to work the way it does. It's because they're supposed to be accountable to the people. Right now, with the Indian Act regime, they're not. But the most important process here is that democracy, is that you get to get information about how the government is doing and what they're doing. If you don't agree with what they're doing, you can elect someone else. And that matters. Because, that's really the point. You want to make the best decisions you can. You want the best decisions made for you. And if they're not making the right decisions, and it's that information that's most important. The communication. You want them to give you intent, and you want them to tell you how they're going to do it. And then you decide at the end of the year or the end of the election cycle whether or not you think it was the right thing to do. And if it wasn't, you try someone else. But at this point, when you get into tricky, it's all on you. And I don't want to end on this heavy-handed part, but it is. You'll be independent. More independent than you were, and then at some point you will be fully independent. And when you do that, the decisions you make have consequences. You can't just blame them on the federal government anymore. It'll be your own people, That's it. You elected your own people to make decisions, and if mistakes were made, and you try to do what you can to fix them, but it's no longer Ottawa's fault. It's no longer the Queen's fault. It's no longer Victoria's fault. All those sorts of things. And that's terrifying, but it's also awesome at the same time. It's like the first time you moved out on your own. You just got to be more responsible. And as long as you can communicate to your people that this is for keeps, but the payoff could be great, that your life could be so much better after treaty, that at that point, it's worth it. It's worth being independent.
I'm not supposed to interrupt or anything, but I wanted to know, about the money mismanagement that the government, it's not the white people's fault. It's not necessarily IMF's fault when things are bankrupt on a band of people. It is money mismanagement. But if it wasn't for the white people who paid income tax, or the people who work all over the world that pay taxes, we would have no money, because it's the white people that send the money to the Sliammon people, to any bad nation. It's everybody that works. It's not their fault. It's money mismanagement.
Oh, well, okay. I think I know where you're coming from with this. And I think the idea here is that the Sliammon people existed here before white people came here. And as a result, they occupied territory that Sliammon had right to, because they were more powerful or because smallpox wiped out a lot of Sliammon. The one thing about that is that the argument is that that should not have happened. And by and large, the people of Canada agree with that. So think of treaties as fixing that mistake. And yes, the money is coming from Canadian taxpayers, but the working theory here is that the Canadian taxpayers would not be as rich if they did not have native land or access to it.
Isn't it true that other band members that voted for treaty up towards north are bankrupt right now? I haven't found it in the computer.
I
But
can't-
they're bankrupt
Yep.
and they're living in campus right now.
I can't really comment on other First Nations in their treaties, because depending on which nations you're talking about, I don't really hear that happening in NISTA. And the treaties east of the Rocky Mountains, those were all negotiated before 1900, where I think the Canadian government did not act in the interests of Native people, but in their own interests. And what this is for, what treaty is about, is giving First Nations the ability to make their own decisions with their own resources.
Can I ask one more question? So
Yeah.
that the government people would love any native band to go treaty, because we're so busy slicing each other's throats and lining our pockets, that we will have nothing in the end, and the generations of people will have nothing.
I think it really-
Living up in the bush.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the decisions that you make. If people agree to abide by a democratic society, then, and the people they elect really mess it up, they have their own selves to blame. But the thing is, the people I see, the people I've met here, they're not as incompetent as you worry that they are.
There's a lot of poverty people in Sliammon.
There's-
Poverty people in Sliammon have no gains. The only people that gain are the people in the offices.
Well, I can't really comment on how that works here. And I've heard the same comment in our own First Nation. And the thing is, I don't know what rules you have in place now, but the people who are working for our First Nation now got their jobs by going through a process that was fair and equal. And as a result, they've earned their jobs. And the thing is, with treaty, what you can do is adopt rules that are similar or better. Hopefully, as well as you can get
People
them.
have jobs around here, year after year. It's always the same group of people. There's not, everybody in Sliammon needs a chance, even if it was on hands. The people were on hands to say, come learn this, because you don't have an education. That would be good for all the people, whether it's forestry, whether it's schooling, or whatever. They need people to, all of us people in Sliammon need better education. All of us people in Sliammon need people to stand by them, whether you're worthy or unworthy. And there's a lot of us that are unworthy people to not look at.
I think what the treaty presents is the opportunity to make those changes. I think you're outlining a whole raft of things that can be talked about. The thing is, after treaty, okay, let's say that the treaty is voted against, it's voted down, and you want to make a change, and you want to make everything better, you don't have the resources that you would under treaty to make those changes. And with treaty, you do have the tools. And with treaty, and I think it's exactly the same as ours, we have to have an election 6 months after the effective date of the treaty. We have to.
The treaty
So-
was voted down in 2001, and it was voted down, and the people continued to vote for treaty. They did not ask the people of Sliammon if we need to go forward, they just continued doing it. Everybody in Sliammon has a right to vote what's going on with their life. It's their land. This is their land too, not just the people in the offices.
No,
They
that's
have
true.
a right to vote. They have a right to vote for who sits in that chair.
And I think they
You
did.
cannot put yourself in the chair because you're blood related.
Well, I can't really comment on that, but I think the real idea here is that the treaty, apart from the government, let's not talk about the government, all right? Let's pretend that everything you said is true. Let's pretend that it is.
I can't pretend it is true.
Okay, let's just say it is, okay? Now, would you rather be in a situation where you can do very little about it, or would you rather be in a situation where you have laws in place that allow you to not only change the government, but have resources to fix the things that you said are wrong? And I think you're making a mistake in thinking that the treaty and this current government are the same thing. And I'm not saying anything wrong against the government that you have. What I'm saying is that under treaty, you'll have the power to fight to make those changes that you don't have the power for now. So, I think...
It's all about the money, and it's all about the people who are selling your people's rights, who are selling your people's status. It's not about what's going to happen in this boy's generation and his kid's generation. It's about what's now, and this is the top of the icing. It's all about the money, not the people.
Okay, thank you once again for your comments. Everybody is entitled to your opinion. The reason for having these kind of forums is so that we have that opportunity to talk about them. So we hope that today we've been able to provide you with a little bit of information that you can digest a bit. I've heard commitment from both your chief counselor and your chief negotiator to answer any further questions. I know myself and John, other nations around the province that are in the treaty are more than happy to share the experiences that we have. I want to say, I think, and I don't think John will get too angry with me for doing this, but we need to be real too. You know, we keep asking ourselves, and we ask ourselves when we were voting on treaty, you know, is this right for us? Is this the thing to do? And we told ourselves that the reason we wanted it, the majority of our people wanted it, is because we wanted that opportunity and the tools to be able to make change. And I hear the question all the time, and I was up to us how those things work. And that's the answer to virtually every question. I think what John was talking about is a learning process that we went through in our community, that we have responsibilities as citizens to say those things, to bring up those things that we think are not working right, and to be a part of the solution and helping to change them. And I think that's what we're trying to do under treaty. So on the other side of that, I think that it's fair for us to say that things don't change overnight either. You know, on effective date, our lives didn't get better. I'll tell you that right now. We're still struggling. We still have our challenges. But who doesn't? The treaty is there for us to use as a tool. The treaty will change nothing. We will make the changes. That's the biggest lesson we learned, that we have to take those tools and make use of them, create the wealth for the benefit of future generations. So that's really how we've looked at it. It's a message that, you know, it's hard learned. It's hard for me to say that, you know, I probably won't get benefits out of treaty. But I sure as heck hope that my young nieces and nephews and the children that are coming up are going to start seeing changes. We're seeing little changes a year into it. We've changed our education policy. We've opened it up to allow for that kind of capacity development in our community. That might not seem like a lot, but for us that was huge because we weren't able to do that before. We didn't have the resources to do it. So the changes are going to take time. You know, keep that in the back of your mind. I constantly praise our people for being so patient with us because it can be frustrating. We thought, you know, this is going to be a whole new world for us. Well, it will be. And I think that, you know, as John said, we're all pretty bright people and we know what we want for our future. So that's the decision that's before you now as common people.
Can you ask me a question? Does every other person on every reserve, on your reserve, do they all have 3 or 4 jobs and get paid for 3 or 4 jobs, like they do in Sliammon?
I can't answer that.
They do in Sliammon, people are getting paid 3 or 4 jobs a day.
Who is it?
Okay. I'd like to open up the floor. There's others that might have questions, and I smell supper. And it's killing me. Okay. So is there any other in the audience who might have a quick question for any of the panel members? Otherwise, we'll all be around during dinner. Please feel free to answer questions, ask questions. I encourage you to follow up with your treaty team if you'd like to have some one-on-one meetings. They're more than willing to come to your homes, to have coffee with you, to have those kind of discussions. So I don't see any hands.
I do.
And with due respect, Sherry, I have to say that we have our elders going to say a prayer for dinner, and I'd ask you to approach us on the side if you could. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kijk het zoekje had het koude vrouwen zo'n spoortrein. det som skjedde på Storhetstes er boktelsen. Det skjedde på skånken for vi åttafor åsamhet tabe åsamhet skjeren og skjeren det skjeren from stan klar til det kan se det skjedde i Thank you.